Is it enough? Was justice really served? Today's show, we have a very special guest, attorney Geneva Pinson, to chime in on today's discussion. Today's show will be a call in show. That number for you will be 708 414 0849. Again, that's 708 414 0849. And with that, let us begin. The Derek Chauvin sentencing, 22 and a half years. We all saw this, and an array of emotions and feelings about the sentencing varied. A lot of folks were not happy with it. Some folks feel the justice was served. However, George Floyd's family, they themselves had their own opinion about the sentencing, and I do want to chime in on that. Coming from a article from the New York Post that I came across. Starting here, Minneapolis, relatives of George Floyd slammed a 22-and-a-half-year sentence imposed on former police officer Derek Chauvin Friday as a slap on the wrist. During a news conference outside the Hennepin County Courthouse, Floyd's nephew, Brandon Williams, said that 22 years is not enough. "We were served a life sentence. We can't get George back," he said. "I feel Chauvin should have received the life sentence as well." Williams said it sends the wrong message that you can kill a black man in cold blood and get a slap on the wrist. "I won't celebrate this," he added, "but I will celebrate a guilty conviction on a police officer who killed a black man." Floyd's younger brother, Rodney Floyd, also blasted the sentence. "This right here, this 22-year sentence they gave this man is a slap on the wrist. We're serving a life sentence, not having him in our lives, and that hurts me to death," he said. Chauvin, 45, had faced a maximum penalty of 40 years on the most serious charge, a second-degree unintentional murder. Under the sentencing guidelines, he could potentially get out early on good behavior after serving 2/3 of his sentence, or just under 15 years. Prosecutors asked for 30 years. Speaking outside the courthouse, the Reverend Al Sharpton says Chauvin's punishment is not justice because George Floyd is not alive. "One sentence does not solve a criminal justice problem," he added. Lastly, Floyd family attorney Ben Crump thanked the legions of Americans who took to the streets in protest following Floyd's murder last May. "We can breathe just a little easier," he said, easier today, and we thank you for that," Crump said, adding, "We have gotten some accountability on the criminal level." He also pointed out that there is still a chance Chauvin would face more prison time at his upcoming federal civil rights trial. The federal charges are still pending, so I do believe it is still attainable to get maximum accountability for George Floyd, he said. And those are the sentiments of the George Floyd family. And so today, my special guest, attorney Geneva Pinson, in the building. How you doing today, Geneva?
Fine. How you doing?
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to comment during the course of the broadcast today. And again, today's show is a call-in show, and that number is 708 414 0849. Again, that's 708 414 0849. So, counselor, the Derek Chauvin sentencing. I am so happy to have you aboard because I follow your page on Facebook all the time. Your professional opinion, your legal point of view is always respected by those of us who check out your post. And so today,
Thank you.
no problem. Today, I definitely wanted to know, your feelings, your thoughts about this sentencing. And so I want to start it off with the first question. First, I would like to know from you, what are your personal thoughts on the sentencing thus far?
Well, my personal thoughts on the sentencing is that he should have gotten more time. Um, he got 22 and a half years, and he'll do, from what I've been told, he'll do two-thirds of that time in Minnesota. And I just believe he should have gotten more time. When police officers kill a person in their custody, murder a person in their custody, they are abusing authority given to them by the people. So I feel they should pay severely for that. So I don't think 22 and a half years is enough. Personally, I don't think the maximum was 40 years. Personally, I don't think that would have been enough.
Right,
But,
right,
but, but that's just a personal feeling of outrage, right? So if the judge had given him something more like 30, 35 years, I could have been happy with that because he doesn't have any prior criminal convictions.
right,
It's kind of hard to say you're going to give somebody with no prior criminal convictions the maximum sentence for anything, right?
right,
But his conduct, what he did to George Floyd was just so outrageous, so beyond the acceptable, what's acceptable in law enforcement, in
right.
my opinion.
Yeah,
He should have gotten a lot more than 22 years,
I feel you. I feel
in my
you.
personal.
I feel you. Okay. All right then. Well, next question. In your professional opinion, what do you think would have been fair? Is this in line with how sentencing for crimes like this, charges like this, typically are? What are your professional thoughts?
So I can really only compare this in my mind to what would have happened in Illinois or
Right.
what should have happened in Illinois.
Okay.
Because I don't know what the sentencing is generally like in Minnesota. But I will say that professionally, um, you know, in Illinois, what Derek Chauvin did would have been a first degree murder, right? Because he
Okay.
knew that his actions would cause a strong probability of death or great bodily harm to George Floyd.
Okay.
So that would have given him a sentencing range of 20 to 60 years.
Oh, okay.
And 20 to 60, not up to 40 years. And in Illinois, just I've been doing murder cases for 19 years. I can't, and usually I represent people who've already been convicted. I'm trying to get them a new trial or a new sentencing hearing. I really can't remember the last time I saw someone with a murder case get a 20-year sentence, right?
Wow. Wow.
In Illinois, particularly when we're talking about something that happened with a gun, but this was not a gun case. But in Illinois, when you look at first degree murder sentences, you're usually looking at more like 45 years, 50 years. You'll even see 70 years or more in a lot of murder cases. So professionally, I see this sentence as something that's really skewed toward the lower end. And when I look at that and I ask why, and feel free to interrupt me so I
Oh
don't go
no,
on
go
and
right
on.
ahead. Go right ahead, girl.
When I ask why, I wonder, you know, is this something that the judge is known for, handing out sentences that are somewhat merciful, even in outrageous circumstances?
That's a good question.
And then I also look at the way that this sentencing hearing was conducted. And this is not to criticize the prosecutors because they did an excellent job of getting a conviction in this case.
Yes.
But usually when a prosecutor wants to really send someone away for a long time, at sentencing, at least here in Illinois, they will present witnesses to prior bad conduct by this person, right?
Okay. Okay.
So with Derek Chauvin, we've heard that he put his knee on the neck of a young teenager, 15
Yeah.
years old,
Yeah. I remember
in the
that.
head with
Yeah.
a flashlight,
Hmm.
and put his knee on the boy's neck. Well, I expected to see the prosecutors at sentencing present some evidence of that. I've heard some other some other incidents that where Derek Chauvin was accused of abusing a person while he was on duty. I expected the prosecutors to put on some witnesses to talk about those things. Here in Illinois, they will do that when they really want to send someone away for a long time. But instead, what we got at this sentencing hearing, and again, it's not a criticism, I just wonder why they made these choices. What we saw at Derek Chauvin's sentencing hearing was brief statements by his relatives, by George Floyd's relatives, a brief statement by Derek Chauvin's mother, and then Derek Chauvin saying something I don't even know why he really said anything because
Yeah, I
he didn't
heard.
say anything of substance. Yeah. so, I mean, I thought the sentencing hearing was much more brief and casual than I expected to see. And I think it wouldn't have been that way if the prosecutors really wanted to send this person away for, 30, 40 years. So I wonder about that. And again, it's not a criticism, it's just professionally, I think we would have seen a lot more if they were really trying to send him away for a long time.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. And then, one other point that I will make, which I guess is a personal and professional opinion. Generally speaking, I'm not a person who is in love with sending people to prison
Sure.
for years and years,
Sure.
right? So generally speaking, I think that sentences should consider, whether someone can be rehabilitated, and I think they should be on the merciful side in most circumstances. But generally speaking, that's not what we see.
No.
When we see, yeah, when we see young black boys committing crimes, murder, armed robbery, whatever, we see them get locked away for
Yeah.
years and years and years. They don't see that mercy. So, I understand the people who are saying, well, he got 22 years. He's already in his 40s. You want him to spend the rest of his life in prison. I get what you're saying, and my response to that is, we need to treat people who do similar things similarly. So,
Yes.
if we're going to lock young men up for 50 years, 60, 70 years for committing murder, then certainly when a police officer commits murder, we should give him at least what they would get.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
that's, yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on every point you made. And with you bringing up about how, sentencing and for a similar crime will be here in Illinois compared to where in New York. I wanted to see if you would for us compare the types of sentencing if Chauvin was a regular person compared to him being a law enforcement officer facing murder charges. How would that be any different?
Okay. So what they are calling second degree murder for Chauvin, I believe would be first degree murder here in Illinois, right?
Okay.
So if it's a first degree murder in Illinois, the minimum sentence is 20 years, the maximum is 60. And that's just the normal range, okay? When you are talking about aggravating circumstances, such as I think one of the aggravating circumstances that the court found there was that um, there was exceptional cruelty under Minnesota law.
Okay.
Okay. So here in Illinois, we have a similar type of aggravating circumstance, which is called brutal and heinous and indicative of wanton cruelty.
Oh.
Um, if the jury finds that a crime, a murder, was brutal and heinous and indicative of wanton cruelty, then the sentencing range is much greater. The sentencing range at that point can be up to 100 years,
Wow.
or in some circumstances, with other aggravating circumstances, the sentencing can be up to natural life. So we have some very harsh penalties for murder here in Illinois. And now, I must say, most of the murders that I have seen have been murders that occurred with a gun.
Okay.
So, in Illinois, when a murder, there is like that 20-year minimum for murder. But when the murder occurred using a gun, you automatically get another 25 years tacked onto the
Wow.
minimum.
Okay.
So we're really looking at a minimum sentence for murder of 45 years if that murder occurred with a gun. Okay. So, you know, I'm not, I guess there are various policy reasons to have stiffer sentences when someone used a gun, but to me, that victim is just as dead whether you strangled them to death or shot them or
That's
whatever.
true. That is true.
So, yeah, yeah. So you can get a person theoretically could get 20 years for what Derek Chauvin did here in Illinois, but I don't think you would see that. I think you would see something more like 30, 40, or more years. Um, because, again, I just don't remember the last time in 20 years I saw someone convicted of murder and get the minimum sentence of 20 years. Even someone who didn't have a prior conviction. I haven't seen that. Now maybe some other lawyer will call in and or see this and disagree with me, and I'd love to sit down and talk with them and they can tell me about the cases where they've seen it because I haven't.
Sure, sure. I get you. I got you. I feel you. Yeah, and again, people, if you're interested in calling in, that number is 708-414-0849. Or if you would prefer to leave a comment in the comment section, feel free to do so as we continue on with our discussion. Now, Geneva, you in one of your posts you had mentioned, if I remember correctly, you had compared the sentencing of Chauvin to someone with a lesser charge, but
Yes.
receiving just as much time. If you could, for
Mhm.
everyone, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. And again, this is Illinois, not Minnesota.
Right.
But in Illinois, we have a charge called armed robbery. I'm sure every state does, right?
Right.
And in Illinois, the sentence for armed robbery, generally speaking, uh, is 6 to 30 years. However, if you commit that crime using a gun, and most people who commit armed robbery are using a gun, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Then, then you automatically get another 15 years added to the minimum. So effectively, here in Illinois, the minimum sentence for armed robbery is 21 years. Okay?
21
And
years.
we're
Wow.
21 years. And we're talking about cases where there was an armed robbery, but no one was shot, no one got hurt. The offender simply had a gun. Minimum sentence 21 years. And
Amazing.
every single day you see people in Illinois, young men usually, young black men often, um, sentenced to at least 21 years for armed robbery.
Wow.
Now, an armed robbery that is not even, half as outrageous as what Derek Chauvin did can get you the same amount of time in prison, basically. So, again, I think that I think that's outrageous. The difference in sentencing, um, someone who did something much less severe is punished just as severely or more severely because they actually could get up to 45 years. So you're looking at 21 to 45 years. Armed robbery, no one hurt, no one
Yeah.
killed.
Man, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That is so amazing to hear, and I hope everyone checking this broadcast out heard that too. That's amazing. Wow,
Mhm.
I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I have heard of young men committing these armed robberies and getting these long sentences, and so when I've
Mhm.
watched murder trials myself, I've often wondered, well, how come the armed robbery nobody got killed is they're serving as much time
Right.
as these murder charges. Wow, that's amazing.
It
That's
is.
amazing.
It it's outrageous. Now their only hope is if they can make some sort of deal with the prosecutor, right? But then they have to give up their right to go to trial.
Yeah,
They have to
yeah.
give up the right to a jury. If they can make some sort of deal, maybe they can get the charge reduced or somehow get something less than that. But if they go to trial and they're found guilty, they're looking at 21 to 45 years.
Let me ask you this, Geneva. Of those cases um, where you see them uh, plea going for a plea, how what percentage of the time do you think most of these guys forfeit having a trial and copping a plea? How what percentage of the time do you think that happens? How often is that happening?
Oh, more often than not, people give up their right to a jury, they give up their right to a trial, and they plead guilty because they know this enormous sentence that they're looking at otherwise. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't do it. Sometimes they did it,
Right,
right?
right.
Not all the time. Not all the time. But they're looking at this enormous sentence, and when someone says, "Hey, if you plead guilty, we'll work with the charge and give you 12 years," then that looks like a bargain, right? That looks like a great deal. Um, and so I think the enormous the great majority of cases, people plead guilty instead of going to trial. Probably, I couldn't give a percentage, but my guess is it's in the 90s or something.
Wow, man,
Most of the
ooh,
time.
man, that's you blowing me
Right.
away with this info. I'm
Yeah.
like, man,
And when you look at these possible sentences, right, you know why, right? Because a lot of times even people who haven't committed a crime, or maybe they did something, but they didn't do exactly what they are accused of. Or maybe they did it, but you know, it's very coercive. The guilty plea offers. I think people are somewhat coerced into pleading guilty because they don't want to spend, the rest of their lives in prison, or a third of their lives in prison, or whatever the case may be.
wow, wow, man, that's man, I'm tripping out. I am tripping out on this. Wow, we have Mary Foltz chimed in, and she's like me. Wow, she put in the
Yeah.
comment section, and what's going on, Tony Spikener? See you chiming in. Thank you for viewing us today. You know, I do have one last question for you, Geneva. Given like we stated like you stated earlier, all of the antics that went on during the trial, all of the testimony that was had, and now with the sentencing of the 22 and a half years, and as you explained how sometimes folks with lesser charges can get just as much time, and the
Right.
various ways and folks are sentenced, in different states. When it's all said and done, what type of message do you think this sentencing of Derek Chauvin is really sending the country? It was worldwide.
Mhm.
Everyone knows about it. Protests happened all over the world as a result of the George Floyd murder, and but yeah, now we have this sentencing here. What does this say to the rest of the country, in your opinion?
Okay. Well, I agree with the Derek Chauvin, the judge. I think his name was Cahill. I agree with him on this. A judge doesn't sentence a person in order to send a message. A
Right.
judge is supposed to look at the facts and the law and determine what the appropriate sentence is. So, a judge doesn't sentence someone with the purpose of sending a message. That being said, everything we do sends a message, right?
Right.
It
Right.
just does.
Mm-hmm.
So when you give someone who committed a murder as cruel as the one committed by uh, Derek Chauvin while he was a cop in the line of duty, supposedly executing his duties as a police officer, when they get that light sentence of 22 years, or in the Van Dyke case, the Laquan McDonald case here
Right.
in
Right.
Illinois, when they get that sentence of 6.5 years, it sends a message that, you won't be punished severely. I
Yeah.
think it does. You may be held accountable. I mean, it used to be that they just wouldn't be held accountable as police officers. If they did these things, they wouldn't be held accountable at all. But now they are being charged, and some of them are being charged and convicted. But they are getting these sentences that are way too lenient, and it sends a message that, if you kill a young black man, you won't pay, really.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
You're
I
right.
was trying to think of a better way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it is what
But
it is. It really is. You
yeah,
know, I mean,
yeah,
the devaluing of black life. That's what I think it continues. That message continues to be
right.
promoted to the rest of us. Yes,
Yes.
we're happy
Black
that
Lives Matter.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go
Black
ahead.
Lives Matter, but not as much as other lives.
Not as
That's
much as
yes.
other lives. You're right. You're absolutely right. And
Uh,
and it's a shame. I mean, we as citizens, we do have to get more involved in the reforming of some of these police departments and the election of some of these judges. We do have to be more civically engaged. Otherwise, they'll continue to do what they do. We have to,
yes.
you know, raise some hell about it. And so, hopefully, this won't be the last conviction that we see, sentencing that we see, accountability that we see, and we
Right.
definitely need to see more. And there definitely needs to be less slaps on the wrist, so to speak, when it comes down to the killings of our young black men and women and brown people too on the streets by law enforcement. So everyone, get involved, get active, apply pressure. And Geneva, I want to thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I just that I totally agree with what you just said, and I'm saying this to myself and all of us. We can't wait for the next George Floyd, and we can't wait for the next Laquan McDonald to apply pressure and to try to bring about systemic change. No one case is ever going to change the whole system, so we have to do more than we are doing. I definitely have to do more than I'm doing. I'll say that.
Hey, we all
So,
do, Geneva.
but
We all
thank
do.
you.
Well, all good. Hey, everyone, I want to thank you all for tuning in Geneva. For anyone that would like to get in touch with you, what is your contact info that you could share with the public so that they could.
My office phone number is 630-844-6960, and my email address is Geneva_Pinson at att.net.
All right, all right, all right, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day. And with that being said, Geneva, stay on with me. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.